going to do that. Well, good morning and welcome to the 4-3-2-1. We're a little late getting started. We've had some technical difficulties. But today we're going to be in Romans chapter 13. We'll be looking at the first 7 verses. In the chapter before chapter 13, Paul began talking about practical Christianity, what it looks like to be a Christian, a follower of God. And so he talked about living like a living sacrifice or living transformed lives. In the last part of that chapter, he gives a long list of what it looks like to be a Christian. He continues that idea in chapter 13 of practical Christianity by looking at submission, in particular to governing authorities. Let's begin reading in verse 1. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection not only to God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this, you also pay taxes. For the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them. Taxes to whom taxes are owed. Revenue to whom revenue is owed. Respect to whom respect is owed. Honor to whom honor is owed. Guys.
God, when the Israelites were their own nation, he determined what their government would be. And he set it up and told them the way to run it. But when the Israelites went into captivity in Babylon, I'm reminded of the words of Jeremiah, where Jeremiah, quoting God, said, live there and be obedient. Even though it wasn't the government God established, that was the government that they were under. There's always this tension between humanity and governing authorities. But this text tells us a really fundamental truth, and that is there is a reason why governments exist. The type of government, I'm convinced as I look through the Word of God, that one lives under is not God's primary concern. We like the idea of a free country, but there are Christians who live in China or other countries, Vietnam, that are oppressive. They still serve as Christians. They can still serve as Christians. The type of government is not the issue. What government does, from God's perspective, is it maintains societal order. That's the reason why Paul to Timothy said, pray for government leaders, kings, so that you may have peace. We have a hard time with that here in our country because we think that, well, the type of government we as Christians need to operate under is a government that allows us to assemble freely and we can worship as we choose. Look, things are wonderful, and I'm glad we have them. But that's not God's primary concern. God's primary concern is that we live the way we're supposed to live. And one of the ways we do that is to maintain this order within society. And that is, we obey the government. The government is here, whether we like it or not, to maintain order. And it's better than the alternative, because the alternative to a form of government and laws is chaos. All right, that's terrible for everybody. So God has established government, and it doesn't matter what type of government it is, but the idea of government so that order can be maintained in a society and people can treat one another properly.
Well, continue on with that. I think the other main point in these verses is not only is government from God, as Christians we're to submit to government. We are to obey our government. And he really points to, I believe, 2 ideas in this text why we should be willing to obey government. First of all, it's for our good. If we do what is right, we will be blessed, as the text often says. But if you're a wrongdoer, government is designed to punish those who are evildoers. The second reason I think we ought to be willing to obey government is 3 different times in this text. Government is called a servant or a minister. They are our fellow servants. They are both have an order or marching instructions from God. And ultimately, whether we like government or not, the reason we submit ultimately is because we are submitting to God. As Paul talks about in Colossians chapter 3, to servants to masters, we submit ultimately because out of fear of the Lord, out of respect for who God is.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning. We hope these lessons help you in your lives. We hope you'll join us again on Tuesday morning Tuesday morning when we get into the rest of chapter 13. Have a great day.